The stories are rampant of people who started with a candy store and took it from there. There are lots of people who have the ambition and have the motivation and have succeeded. I mean, lots of people have come from nowhere and become part of the 1%.
Joining me now, Katrina vanden Heuvel, editor and publisher of The Nation magazine, and Sam Seder, host of the online podcast Majority Report, co-host of the Ring of Fire radio show. I find this topic fascinating because the way that this particular psychology emanates in our policies and politics is massively destructive for the country, and so I want to kind of understand it. And I think part of it does have to do with what Nick Hanauer was saying about this sense that you've earned it. And if someone starts to question that, they're taking away something profound, right, about how you think of yourself.
It's also the culture. I mean, think 10, 15 years ago, before we've had this smart populist moment come upon us, the masters of the universe. I mean, we did have a culture in which wealth and status and richness was prized. I think we're at a very different tectonic shift. And it's what Paul Krugman called the paranoia of the plutocrats. They feel it coming. And it's not so much the populism that's spiraling out of control, it's inequality, and it's a sense on the part of millions of people that the system is unfair, that it's rigged. And these people, you know, no one's saying equal income for all.
Yeah, that was Chris Christie's line the other day, that like everyone's going to have an equal salary.
The founding fathers would have rolled over in their grave because they were for a system where you didn't have extraordinary concentrated wealth, which was going to destroy the experiment of self-governance. This is a rigged system. People feel it in their gut. There is a reason that a majority of Americans support an increase in the minimum wage, and it's transpartisan.
Right.
And these guys, most of them are guys, feel it.
Yes. And yeah, so you think that, I think that's a really good point, that they actually, part of this is reaction to the fact that the facts are inequality is growing. The facts are the public is increasingly aware of that, and so the reaction emotionally is this kind of defensiveness.
And I also think that it stems from the fact that they have sort of untethered themselves. I mean, the wealthy now, and you've written about this, the wealthy have untethered themselves from the society in which they live in. They are living now in a psychographic as opposed to actually like a geographic location. And I think to a certain extent...
Wait, explain what that means.
Well, I mean, I think they're traveling in circles of other wealthy people. They are not, you know, I heard a story once about Bob Rubin riding in a town car going somewhere in New York City, calling the assistant, the deputy mayor, complaining about traffic, but not knowing where he was in the city.
And this, by the way, this is going on.
That, I think, is what the story is. They are untethered from society. They don't want to give back, and thus they cannot say that they've gotten benefit from society, and that's why.
But we need to tether them back. And I also want to speak to Nick Hanauer for a moment. Nick Hanauer, as you spoke of, was in Washington the other day with a group called Patriotic Millionaires or Smart Capitalists. There are people like Bill Pimco. I wrote about in a column called Guilt of the Gilded. I mean, Bill Gross, of Pimco, the global investment manager, says to his colleagues, you better just welcome what you have, and we better start taxing wealth higher than work. And so there are people speaking out, and my view in our society is when the elites divide, I believe in social movements, and we need a social movement for shared prosperity, but when the elites divide and you have a countervailing force to the ugliness of the Sam Zells, the Wilbur Rosses, you could see a more enlightened politics. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was not exactly from the hovels of America.
No, he wasn't. But a huge part of that had to do, so a huge part of that had to do with the sort of grassroots movements at the time. But I think there is something about this kind of untethering that's happening, right? Where the entire structure of American society is getting so attenuated that you can live in finer and finer little slices of it. And that's what was so striking to me about the Tim Armstrong comment, was like, he wasn't trying to be a jerk. Right. He really wasn't trying to be a jerk. He was just trying to say, hey, look, I think he was actually trying to say, hey, look, we're good people. Of course we're going to pay for this because that's what we do for our employees. But it's like, not understanding what that would mean.
And I think what's really problematic is you can find cranks like that really in any walk of life. You just hear about them more when they're extremely wealthy or they're running a company. But the bottom line is that we need the real problem is when they begin to determine our politics, because they move from a plutonomy to a plutocracy. I mean, and this is all stuff that you've written about quite a bit. But we see it even in the context, you know, we were talking about this earlier, in the context of New York politics, when you have a Democratic governor who is, talking about, has a problem with taxing millionaires at a time where, we clearly have
can afford it. They can afford it.
But the good news is there has been a resurgence of the Democratic wing of the Democratic Party, spurred on by fast food workers striking, spurred on by social movements. And I think, we talked earlier about the Plutocrats. They feel it in their bones, and they know that they've never had the moment of accountability because President Obama, what's he done?
They have never had the moment of accountability. But here's the craziest thing. The craziest thing is that if you are, I never stop shocking me, but if you're running for office, you talk to those folks of all political stripes all the time. It's all you do is call up rich people and talk to them.
But here's the thing. We need public financing. People's eyes may glaze over. But until we have public financing, we are not going to be able to unravel the rigged system because the rules are built for the wealthiest. And not the wealthiest. I mean, there are so many wealthy people in this country who vote against their self-interest, work against their self-interest because they want to have economic justice and social justice, and all power to them. But most of them writing the rules want a country that is not of, by, for the people, but of the corporations.
I'm a firm believer that the most insidious aspect of the current financing system is social as much as structural, which is it literally gets in the brains of people running for office that all they do all day is talk to people that have lots of money. It's poisonous.
60% of their time spent fundraising.
Katrina Vanden Heuvel and Sam Seder, always a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
That is all in for this evening. The Rachel Maddow Show starts right now. Good evening, Rachel.